The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30, just as Emma had promised. I smoothed my navy dress, the one I'd worn to her high school graduation, and checked the dining table one last time. 3 place settings, fresh violets from my garden, and her favorite lasagna cooling on the counter. At 42, my daughter was finally ready to introduce someone special. Before we go on, show your love by subscribing and saying hi in the comments. Share your location too. We love hearing from you. Let's get back to the story. Mom, this is George, Emma said, stepping inside with a man whose salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the face that had haunted my dreams for 15 years. My wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor like my carefully constructed evening. George, my ex-husband who'd walked out when Emma was 12, stood in my doorway wearing an expensive suit and a stranger's smile. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Richardson, he said, extending his hand as if we'd never shared a bed, never signed divorce papers, never screamed at each other while our daughter cried upstairs. Emma watched my face intently, her green eyes, his eyes, studying every micro-expression. Isn't he wonderful, Mom? We've been together for 3 months now. She smiled, but something cold flickered beneath the surface. I know exactly who he is. George sat at my dining table like he belonged there, complimenting my cooking with the same charm that had once swept me off my feet at 25. Emma hung on his every word, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, touching his arm with an intimacy that made my skin crawl. Your daughter tells me you work in accounting, George said, cutting into his lasagna. Very practical. The same dismissive tone he'd used when I'd suggested community college, when I'd wanted to learn photography, when I'd dreamed of anything beyond his vision for our life. I'm a senior financial analyst now, I replied, my voice steadier than my hands. I've built a good life for Emma and myself. Emma's laugh sounded sharp as glass. Oh, George knows all about building good lives, don't you, baby? She leaned against him, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. He's taught me so much about family dynamics. I excused myself to the kitchen, my legs barely holding me upright. In the pantry's darkness, I pressed my forehead against the cool wall and tried to breathe. This had to be some sick coincidence. Emma couldn't know. She couldn't possibly know and still be. Mom. Emma's voice cut through my panic. You okay in there? George was just telling me about his first marriage. Apparently, his ex-wife was very unstable. After George excused himself to the bathroom, Emma cornered me in the kitchen. Her smile never wavered, but her voice dropped to a whisper that chilled my blood. You should see your face right now, Mom. Like you've seen a ghost. Emma, we need to talk. That man is my father. She laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? George David Richardson, born October 15, 1975. Same birthday you used to cry about every year. My knees buckled. I gripped the counter, the granite cold against my palms. If you know, then why? Because I wanted to see what kind of man abandons his 12-year-old daughter for a 23-year-old secretary. Emma's mask finally cracked, revealing something raw and vengeful underneath. I wanted to see if he'd try to sleep with his own daughter when she threw herself at him. Horror crawled up my throat. Emma, what have you done? What had to be done? She pulled out her phone, swiping to a video. Want to see the recording from our first date? When he told me how young and beautiful I am. How I remind him of someone from his past. The bathroom door creaked. George returned, straightening his tie, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. Everything all right, ladies? George settled back into his chair, reaching for his wine. You both look a little pale. Emma slid her phone across the table, the video paused on his face mid-sentence. I was just showing Mom our conversation from Moretti's last week. The one where you said I had daddy issues and that turned you on. The color drained from George's face as he recognized the recording. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. You see, Mom, Emma continued, her voice steady as a surgeon's blade, I spent 2 years planning this. 2 years finding him, studying him, learning exactly what kind of predator he really is. I watched my ex-husband, this stranger wearing George's face, realize he'd been caught. His charming smile crumbled, revealing the coward who'd run when Emma needed him most. Now, Emma, let's not be hasty. Shut up. Her voice cracked like a whip. You don't get to use my name anymore. You lost that right when you walked out on a 12-year-old girl who waited by the window every Friday, thinking you'd come back. George stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. You're both crazy just like before. But Emma was already texting someone. That's funny, because the police are very interested in listening to all 37 minutes of our recorded conversations. Especially the parts where you talked about teenage girls. George lunged for the phone, but Emma was faster. She'd inherited his reflexes but not his cowardice. The phone flew across the room, landing safely on the sofa as he grabbed her wrist. You manipulative little. Let go of her. I surprised myself with the steel in my voice. 27 years melted away, and I was the same woman who'd thrown his clothes on the lawn, who'd changed the locks, who'd rebuilt our lives from ash and abandonment. George released Emma but turned on me with familiar venom. This is your fault. You poisoned her against me. You made her into this psycho who seduces her own father. I never seduced anyone, Emma said quietly. I simply gave you enough rope to hang yourself with. Every text you sent, every inappropriate comment, every time you bragged about your new young girlfriend to your golf buddies, recorded. She retrieved her phone with theatrical calm. I also have bank records showing you've been stealing from your current wife's accounts. And medical records proving you've been lying about your vasectomy to multiple women. Turns out you've got quite the collection of almost children scattered across 3 states. George's face went gray. You can't prove any of that. Private investigator. Emma held up a thick manila folder. Amazing what you can find when you have resources and motivation. Want to see the photos from your business trips? I sank into my chair as Emma spread the contents of the folder across my dining table. Photos, bank statements, medical records, and what looked like legal documents created a damning mosaic of the man I'd once loved. Emma, how did you? Mom's insurance settlement from the car accident 5 years ago, she said, not taking her eyes off George. The one you caused by texting while driving. The one you blamed on black ice. My blood turned to static. What car accident? Emma's smile was sharp as broken glass. The one where George rear-ended you at 45 miles per hour because he was sexting his 19-year-old intern. The one that gave you chronic back pain and 3 months of physical therapy. George backed toward the door. That was an accident. The police report was filed by Officer Danny McLean, your drinking buddy from college. The same Officer McLean who's been taking bribes to look the other way on your drunk driving arrests. Emma pulled out another photo. George and a uniformed cop sharing drinks at what looked like a strip club. Danny's been very cooperative since internal affairs got involved. I felt the room spinning. You were the other driver? That night on Riverside. I was following you home from your book club, George admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I just wanted to talk. To apologize for what? Emma's voice rose. For abandoning us. For never paying child support. For convincing Mom she wasn't worth loving. Or for stalking her for 15 years. The manila folder seemed bottomless. Emma produced phone records, credit card statements, and what looked like surveillance photos. All documenting a pattern I'd never seen. He's been watching you, Mom. Tracking your credit score, your employment history, your dating life. He killed 3 potential relationships by anonymously sending your boyfriend's photos and lies about your mental instability. My hands shook as I flipped through printed emails, social media screenshots, and bank records showing payments to a private investigator. 15 years of phantom interference suddenly made sense. Why? I whispered. George slumped against the wall, defeated. I needed to know you were okay. That Emma was okay. I made a mistake. A mistake. Emma's laugh was hollow. You systematically destroyed Mom's chances at happiness for 15 years, then tried to sleep with your own daughter. That's not a mistake. That's pathological. She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. Remember Ethan Watts? The photographer from your art class 3 years ago. I nodded, remembering how he'd suddenly stopped calling after our fourth date. George sent him fabricated police reports claiming you'd been institutionalized for violence. Ethan was terrified of you. Emma's voice cracked. And James Martinez, the teacher from my old school? George convinced his ex-wife that you were trying to steal him, complete with doctored photos of you two together. Each revelation felt like a physical blow. My entire adult life had been manipulated by a ghost I thought I'd escaped. I want to know why. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. I stood up, facing the man who'd destroyed my life twice. Why stalk me? Why ruin my relationships? Why come back now? George looked older suddenly, as if admitting the truth had aged him years and minutes. Because I never stopped loving you, Hannah. Even after I left. You had a funny way of showing it. I was young. Stupid. Lisa was pregnant and I thought. He ran his hands through his graying hair. I thought I could have both lives. Keep you as backup while I explored options. Emma made a sound like a wounded animal. Mom was your backup plan? It wasn't supposed to be permanent. Lisa lost the baby and I realized what I'd lost. But by then you changed the locks. Filed the papers. You were stronger without me and I. His voice broke. I couldn't accept that. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So you spent 15 years making sure I stayed alone. Making sure Emma grew up thinking love meant abandonment. I was protecting you both. You were protecting your ego. Emma stood up, her chair scraping against hardwood. You couldn't stand that we were better without you. So you made sure Mom never found out just how much better we could be. She pulled out her phone again. The police will be here in 20 minutes. I'd suggest you start thinking about whether you want to confess now or wait for the lawyers. George tried the door, but Emma had locked it from the inside. He was trapped in the house where he'd once lived, surrounded by the family he'd destroyed and abandoned. Please, Emma. Hannah. We can work this out. Family therapy counseling. Family. I laughed, surprising myself. You forfeited that when you walked out. You confirmed it when you tried to seduce our daughter. I didn't know she was. Yes, you did. Emma's voice cut through his lie. I look exactly like Mom did at my age. Same hair, same eyes, same voice. You knew and it excited you. She held up her phone, playing audio. George's voice saying horrible things about Daddy's girl fantasies, and how young Hannah had been wasted on stability. I grabbed the table to keep from falling. You sick bastard. The recording timestamps show he knew who I was from our first coffee date, Emma continued. He called me Little Hannah 3 times before catching himself. George's face crumpled. I was drunk. I didn't mean. You meant every word. I found my voice cold and clear. Just like you meant every lie you told those investigators. Every relationship you sabotaged. Every night you made me wonder what was wrong with me. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Emma unlocked the door just as red and blue lights painted our windows. The beautiful thing about 15 years of evidence, she said to George, is that there's no statute of limitations on stalking, harassment, and fraud. And absolutely none on what you tried to do with me. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom watching George led away in handcuffs. Guilty on all charges. Stalking, identity theft, insurance fraud, and attempted incest. The judge, a woman my age who'd raised 3 daughters alone, gave him the maximum sentence. Emma squeezed my hand as we walked down the courthouse steps. Are you okay, Mom? I breathed in the spring air, feeling lighter than I had in 15 years. I'm better than okay. I'm free. We'd used the settlement money, tripled after George's insurance company discovered his fraud, to start the Phoenix Foundation, helping women escape manipulative relationships and rebuild their lives. Emma had become my partner in every way that mattered. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't set that trap? Emma asked as we reached my car. I looked back at the courthouse where my past had finally been put to rest. I wonder what would have happened if I'd been stronger 15 years ago. If I'd fought for us then. You were strong enough, Emma said firmly. You raised me to be the kind of woman who fights back. That evening, I stood in my garden watering the violets Emma had planted. They were thriving now, deep purple and resilient. My phone rang. Ethan Watts, the photographer. We'd reconnected after Emma tracked down all of George's victims and explained what had really happened. "Dinner tomorrow?" Ethan asked. "I have something I want to show you." For the first time in 15 years I said yes without fear. George's ghost was finally dead and we were finally free to live.